Are you trying to make up your mind between the SimMagic Alpha Mini and the Fanatec CR7DD? Fear not, because Racecraft Simulations has the answer for you, and we're going to tell you which
green light.
Yes, because the cars are bound to appear running behind Calvin, but we'll hopefully give you on hot status, which is first piece of both familiar to you. They have been captain in recent years, and both last year we will consider to be on Aston Martin. Have no GT Aston Martin now are so this year Ollie has team going to McLaren alongside Davis to develop the motorsport car on position. It was a very successful qualifier for McLaren, walked out the top four places on the grid. But just discussing the plot there, part of it is because McLaren are still talking about
Low tire pressure, stay clear of the curbs.
Its exit looks clear. Your tyres are cold, watch out. You've got cold brakes all round. just done a 153.63. Brake temps look good. Tyre temps are good. Your lap time was 153.04. Fastest lap for Oulton, 151.25. Good lap, that's your best in the session.
The fastest step so far.
152.77. That's your best lap in this session. That was 152.42. What's your speed limit in the pits? Acknowledged. We'll have spotter calls from here, please, Claire. pit exit, you can push now. Your brakes are cold, let's get some heat into them. Cold tyres all round. Yellow flag. Green flag, all clear. Brake temperature's okay. High temperatures are good. Good luck. That's your cookies today. That's your quickest lap. You've just done a 151.73. Okay, champ, you need to watch the track limits. look out for the pit speed limit.
Come on, go, go, go.
Hey Arjun, I guess they're all in the GT4 voice channel.
We should join the GT4 War channel.
Yeah, that's where Ilko is.
Right.
Alright.
Should be fun. Okay, let's get started. So, this is meant to be somewhat interactive, so if you have questions or want to comment something, just feel free to interrupt me whenever. So we are here to talk about the BMW M2 CS, the most fun car in ACC, as it says on my slide. So, starting with the specs of the car, so it has a 3-liter inline-6 engine with the turbo and about 340 horsepower. This is due to the limited boost, so the street version actually has more power, but because the car is built for spec racing and to also work in multi-class environments, so we have the American version of this racing car, which only has 340 horsepower, which is part of why it's very much fun. The transmission is a 7-speed DSG with a mechanical limited slip diff. The car weighs about 1,600 kilos, which is quite a lot. Typical GT3 cars weigh about 1,400 kilos, and they have a lot more tire. The fuel capacity is 85 liters. The tires are slicks. They are 27 centimeters wide, and using the GT4 compound. And the chassis is completely unmodified from the street car, with the exception of a roll cage. The suspension is also just a bolt-on set of coilovers and stiffer anti-roll bars, adjustable anti-roll bars, but it is still just a bolt-on suspension, not any kind of super high-end racing suspension. So the engine has a very flat power curve due to the boost limits. So you basically get full power from somewhere around 5,000 RPM all the way up. And because transmission is completely unmodified except for software from the street version, the gear ratios are really kind of weird. First gear is practically useless. You really don't use it pretty much ever. And the gear ratios are so wide that even 6th gear is almost unnecessary, and 7th is completely useless. You will never ever find that gear. So like I said, the chassis is directly based on the street version. So this makes the car very heavy. As noted, it's about 200, little over 200 kilos heavier than a GT3 car, and a GT3 car is significantly larger. Also, because it's a street car, it's very tall and the center of gravity is very high, and this is important. We'll get back to this in a little bit. And like I said, the suspension is a bolt-on, so your adjustability is fairly limited. You can change the suspension setup, but you cannot change it quite to the amount that you can do in real purebred race cars. Also, it's worth noting that the suspension is very soft compared to most race cars. And finally, there is basically no aero in this car. There's a little bit of downforce, or I guess more like anti-lift force. The wing has a little bit of an effect, which you will find out if you try tracks like maybe Spa or Monza. But typically you will just run max wing and ignore everything because it doesn't really make any difference even in the straight line speed. So how do you drive this car? So the key, in my opinion, to driving the car is avoiding any sudden, very abrupt steering inputs, because like I said, the suspension is very soft compared to typical race cars like GT3s, GT4s. So this means that whenever you do anything on the steering input, it takes significant amount of time for the car to finish rolling and moving and finishing the weight transfer. And if you ask too much too quick and don't wait for the weight transfer to complete, either you get terminal understeer, which is usually what happens, or you can upset the car very badly and it will go sideways. And because it has fairly limited steering lock, it can be very difficult to recover if you do that. So your steering inputs should be smooth and decisive. You can't make second guesses on, well, I didn't actually want to turn, or things like that. Once you start committing to turning, you are committing to turning. You can make small corrections, but you can't just like decide, oh, I'm not gonna turn after all. That's not gonna work. The only exception is that when you are already turning and you get on power and the rear wants to come out, you really want to catch it before it gets really sideways. Because again, there is fairly limited steering lock. It's not a very good drift car. And the earlier you catch the slide, the less speed you lose and the smaller the correction needs to be. You will need to brake very early in this car because it's very heavy and the tires are not very wide at all. So make certain you don't brake too late, because that is usually what people fail to understand in this car, that it is mostly a street car with just some slicks on it and go onto a track. Also, the car is very front grip limited, so anytime you go into a corner too fast, you will most likely just understeer off the road, and nothing will stop that from happening. Once you miss the braking, there is not really much you can do about that. And so this car, because it has limited power, the acceleration is not great, the braking is not great, so the fastest way around is to drive a little bit more around corners, carrying momentum through them, rather than the GT3 style where you just kind of stop the car, turn the car and go away. In this car you just have to kind of be very smooth about the line you take through a corner, because the acceleration really isn't that great. So, like I said, the car is very front grip limited, so it's very easy to just destroy the front tires if you're scrubbing them every corner. So you don't really want to turn the wheel past the point of your maximum front grip, because the only thing it does is just to boil your front tires, and because the car is already very front limited, it just becomes a death spiral where you wear out the front tires so the car doesn't turn, so you try to turn even more, and then you wear out them even more, and in a little bit you have no front tires left whatsoever. I did a race, I think it was 80 minutes. My worst tire wear was 1.8, and there was another guy who did the same without changing tires, and their worst front tire was 0.8. And the only difference is the driving style, because it's the same car, the same setup, everything. So don't turn the steering wheel too much. If the car doesn't want to turn, the problem isn't that you're not turning the wheel enough, the problem is somewhere else. So one thing that's important to understand is that because this car has very limited setup options, there is no way to make the car, for example, oversteer massively on corner entry. You can make it a little bit loose, but you can't make it drive like a Porsche or whatever. It will never work. You have to understand how the car wants to be driven, rather than trying to force the car to be something else. So getting to the electronics, you want to be running TC on 1 or off, almost always. The aliens, at least some of them, use TC off. I find it a little bit tricky, but it's doable because the car is very predictable. But TC1 is mostly fine. You can do very good lap times on TC1. You should basically never use TC2 in normal conditions because it just cuts way too much. Even when you are not actually sliding the car, it tends to cut in and take your power away. I will say that even in rain, if you are on wets with correct pressures and everything is good, you can run TC1. It's perfectly fine. The only case where I really use TC2 is if I'm on slicks in the wet, because that can get really quite sketchy. As for ABS, you probably always want to use ABS1. The ABS itself is not very good. Even in the dry, it is sometimes better to avoid running too much, at least, into ABS, because it just isn't very good. You, at least in the wet, you definitely get the best braking performance by threshold braking just barely where it doesn't go into ABS. I'm not completely certain about dry. I've checked multiple aliens and I've seen both styles and they are roughly similar lap times, so it's very difficult to say which is exactly better, but just to say that there isn't any need. You don't have to drive the car against the ABS. You can threshold brake, it will work very well. You can also drive it in the dry against ABS. In the wet, you probably want to stay out of the ABS if possible. And finally, don't rev the engine for no reason. So, like I said, the boost mapping for the car is such that there is very little reason to go high revs. You can, it doesn't really hurt, unless you run into the soft limiter. But there just isn't much reason, so you can just avoid shifting the gears too much and stay mostly in third and fourth. You can use second for hairpins. And normally, most people upshift when the second set of yellows comes up on the shift lights. And you really don't want to downshift the second too much because it's very easy to upset the car on corner entry if you are downshifting from third to second because the gear ratios are a little bit funny. So some common driving issues in the M2. Well, if you get oversteer on corner exits, it is generally caused by holding too much steering, not so much the throttle, because the car doesn't really have a whole lot of power. So it's not that your foot is too heavy, it's that your hands are doing too many things. It is possible that you unsettled the car with steering inputs if you did some very quick corrections or something, but it's typically more about just holding too much steering. And especially because the car tends to understeer through mid-corner, it's very common that because the car is understeering, you put more lock into it, hoping that it will turn better, which it doesn't. And then when you get on the power and the balance of the car shifts and the rear tires start to do more than just lateral grip, it's very easy to get the car to go really sideways without. So you have to kind of minimize the steering on corner exits, get the car as straight as possible, and it will just nicely finish the corner in a slight kind of very minimal slip angle and accelerate out nicely without triggering any TC or getting any extra tire scrub. Corner entry understeer, well, that's usually just going in too fast. It is possible that you get this if you just yank the wheel very quickly without waiting for the weight transfer to finish, because if the weight is not on the outside front tire, it's not gonna turn. But mostly it's just going into corners too fast. Mid-corner understeer is almost guaranteed to be just too fast entry speed into the corner, barring any massive issues with the driving line, but that's not car specific. And if you get understeer on corner exit, either you were too early on throttle or not hard enough on throttle, because you want the car to slightly rotate on exit. So you need to get, when you get on the throttle, you need to get hard on the throttle so that there is enough power to kind of almost break the reel loose. Some tips and tricks how to learn how to drive the car. So what I would first recommend if you're really new to this is try to figure out how to feel the chassis motion and weight transfer. So what you can do is that find a very long and wide straight, like Silverstone has some very good places, and just do like side to side steering inputs and really feel the feedback through the steering, because you should be able to feel how, even when you are not doing anything, you just turn the wheel into an angle and then just hold it there, you can feel how the car moves around and then settles into the new kind of angle that is required for that amount of steering input. And that helps you understand how it feels when you drive it through a corner at high speed, because when you do that, you need to take into account the time it takes for the roll to finish before you put the maximum steering input in. And the second thing I would recommend practicing is feeling the grip limits on front and rear. So the front grip is, as in just about every car, is roughly maximized when the steering feedback peaks. So if you turn the wheel more and it gets lighter, you're probably past the front max grip. Well, I mean, almost always you are past it. And on the rear, there isn't really anything I can put into words on how to understand when the rear is about to go, but I will say this car gives you ample warning on the rear when it wants to go sideways. You have a lot of time to feel it and understand that, oh, we are about to go, and do the correction before it actually even gets sideways. And it's a very good idea to practice it. Yes, you will probably spin and crash a few times, but it's better to learn it so that you can run the car on the limit rather than just stay afraid forever because it might go sideways. Okay, any questions so far?
Sounds good. Thank you. That's very
Okay.
well done.
Okay, so I'll do a kind of lap walkthrough for Oulton Park. This is by no means a perfect lap. Actually, I explicitly picked a lap that isn't perfect.
20 minutes remaining, you've got 20 minutes left.
Okay. So, going into the first corner, your braking is roughly at this point, if in ideal conditions. So roughly when the kind of more rubber-laid part of the white line starts is roughly where you brake. It will depend a little bit on things, as we know. It's never quite exactly the same for two different drivers, but this is roughly the place where you would brake. You would start braking hard and then start lifting off the brake when you start turning in, because again, you don't want to overdrive the front of the car. In this corner there are multiple different approaches. I believe the fastest is to do a fairly hefty cut in this car because the car is very stable over curbs, so you can cut really hard and get some power even before you go over the curbing. I don't remember exactly what I did on this lap, but it wasn't perfect. I'm pretty certain I actually missed the apex on this one. Yeah, so this is too wide. I should be going over the curbing more, because again, the car is very stable over curbs, so you can run curbs quite a lot. But I am on power. I think I do actually lift because I was a little bit wide and the exit is a little bit less than perfect. And here is a thing that's very important. So I'm pretty certain some of you have found out that if you are still holding a lot of steering input at this point, it's very easy to get a very big slide. So at this point you need to minimize the steering input. Your car should be pointing like I am pointing almost straight down the road. My steering is almost completely straight. I'm full throttle. That guarantees that because you're not steering anywhere, the car is not gonna go sideways. And by the way, as you saw there, even though the car was still pointing straight, it was still sliding to the left. So it was basically in an almost four-wheel slide. And that's how fast corner exits in the M2 tend to be. The car will still be sliding sideways even if it's pointing in the right direction. And you need to kind of just practice to understand the trajectory of the car so that you can keep your foot down and know that, okay, even though I'm sliding, I'm not gonna go off track. It will all work out. But that is something that just comes with practice. So for this next section, roll it a little bit more. So as you see, I'm getting far to the left because when we go over the crest and to the right, if I'm holding too much steering input going over the crest, it will unsettle the car. This car is very easy to unsettle going over crests because the suspension is very soft. So anytime you go over a crest, you want to be holding as little steering input as possible, and there will be more examples later in the lab. But anyway, I'm getting far to the left so that I can turn before going over the crest and go very straight over it. Yeah, so that's about as much as you want to be steering. I'm on steering ratio 12, so if you're using a slower steering, obviously the actual wheel angle will be more. The braking here is roughly at the second crest, or the bump, or whatever you want to call it. It's probably better in this corner not to use full braking, because this braking zone is very bumpy. It's very, very bumpy, and if you are full 100% brakes into ABS, it's possible that the braking will be kind of worse, because the ABS is not very good. And if you happen to go over a bump and it gets one wheel slightly off the ground, then the ABS goes like, oh no, something terrible is happening. It can cause some minor issues. Also, you probably don't want to go all the way to the right. I mean, you theoretically would, but it's very difficult to get there because we just came through a right-hander and the car wants to kind of slide to the left a little bit. And we want to hook, as in any car, we want to kind of hook the inside because there's some camber on the inside of the corner.
Okay, jump,
as you will
15
notice,
minutes left. That's
I
15
actually went on
minutes.
throttle too early. I had to bail out, and then because I was understeering on the exit and holding too much steering, when I got back on throttle, I got a very big slide. So inside, that's good. Too early on throttle, understeering, too much steering, and the car goes sideways. But as you can see, if you are quick, all it takes is a very quick correction and the car is fine. We are not going anywhere. Okay, so this is tricky. So there are multiple different ways of taking this corner. I believe, especially in this car, I much prefer doing a longer but lower brake pressure braking so that I can turn the car while I'm still on the brakes. I know some people do like a very sharp jab on the brakes and then turn. That can also work. I don't know which one is the best way to do this, but your key is to get the car to turn, and then in the mid corner you are just judging on when can I get on throttle without running wide, and you will actually find out that on this lap I was actually kind of scared and I didn't get on throttle early enough, so I left a lot of space on the right side. And also that's not hard enough on the inside curbing, you can run all over it. I'll take a little bit back here. So the braking here is roughly, this is the marker. I hope you can see it with the screen share quality, but so there is a slightly different colored patch of grass, and that's what I use as a marker. I don't know exactly where it is in reference to the car when I go on brakes, but that's the marker. You could also probably use this, and it would work fine. For this corner, the way I approach is that I do max braking full onto the ABS in a straight line, because this braking zone is fairly smooth here in the beginning. Like, this part is smooth, it's not really smooth here further up. And then bleed off the brakes when I start turning the car and brake very deep into the corner at the reduced brake pressure. And then as soon as you're certain you're making the corner without lifting, you get on full throttle and let the car run wide to the exit. And yeah, I hesitated on the throttle, so I left about almost a car width on the exit curbing. You can run deep into the exit curbing. In this car, the curb is safe. In some cars, it's not, but in this car, it's very safe. Okay, the braking reference here is, I would say, somewhere between these two patches of grass. And the idea is to turn the car to the left, go over the curb, the inside curb, in a reasonably straight line. Actually, it would. I think on this lap I was still turning a little bit, and it wasn't great. I do bleed off the brakes when going over the curb, because I'm kind of worried that it will unsettle the car if I'm too heavy on the brakes going over it. And then I go back on the brakes to slow the car and help it turn to the right. I think you could probably cut more both on the left and the right than I do here, but it's still a reasonably fast lap, and I'm not really certain how much of a difference it would make. The really important part is cutting on the left on the exit from the chicane. If you cut too much, the car wants to go sideways really badly. If you don't cut enough, you're gonna be slow on the exit. So could probably go more over the curb, but this is fine. Again, back on full brakes, start turning the car and bleed off the brakes, because it's not gonna turn if you are still on full brakes. Could cut a little bit more, but not much more. You don't want to put your inside tires onto the gravel, because that risks getting a slow puncture. This is one of the few places where TC1 is a little bit tricky. If you get on throttle too quickly, you can unsettle the car. You have to just kind of roll onto the throttle instead of just mashing it instantly.
Okay, Jack.
And
10 minutes to
here
go.
I would
10 minutes
recommend
left.
not trying to force the car to stay tight to the left. Just let it run wide the exit curbing on the right, because if you try to turn too sharp, you will probably scrub some speed because of excessive steering angle, and the tires will just slide sideways, and that will reduce the speed you can carry through. So you can even get on the curb if you want to, that's fine. Braking reference is where the color of the track limit line changes roughly. You could probably use the Marshall post as well. Don't use, obviously, the sign, because it's probably not going to be there a couple of laps later. Into this corner, we want to cut really tight on the right side curb. Basically, we want the midpoint of the curb to go right between the wheels of the car. But if we are still turning too much when we go over the curb, it's very easy to get a huge moment where the car will slide in the wrong direction. Like, the rear will slide to the left, the car turns to the right, and that creates a massive problem. So I don't remember how this lap went, but on most laps you want to kind of try to not hold too much steering input going over the curb, because it can unsettle the car really badly. So brake, turn. This is almost a perfect amount of cut. The steering angle is a little bit on the excessive side, but this is a quali lap, so risks are to be taken. And here you can go really tight on the left side. I've actually gotten a track cut here on the left, because it is faster to shortcut as much as possible, because it gives you a straighter line through the corner. So just be mindful if you start cutting it really tight that it is actually possible to get the track cut here. But anyway, we just do a direction shift, which in this car means that you kind of have to spend like half a second changing the steering direction. You can't just like instantly yank it. Otherwise I'm just gonna go straight if I do that. Because again, the weight transfer takes a little bit of time to happen. Modulating the throttle, nothing to see really. Here, a little dab of the brakes when turning in to get the car a little bit loose so that it turns better, because this corner is really tricky in almost any car. You can cut quite a lot on the inside. I don't remember how this lap goes, but cut a lot on the inside. Be a little bit careful on getting on power, because it's very easy to get the slide here. So I think I just roll onto the power instead of just mashing the pedal to get a feel of how the car is going. And I think I actually was a little bit over careful on this lap. I didn't use all of the exit. So yeah, that's a fine cut. Didn't use all of the exit, that's fine. Here again, we are going to go over a crest. If you take the line that a lot of people take, which kind of hugs the left side of the track here, you're gonna go over the crest with a lot of steering input, and the car will get a little bit squirrely over there. It's easy to hold it, but why even take the risk when you don't need to? So get on the right here, turn going uphill, go over the crest with the minimum possible steering angle to not run wide. Turn almost straight over the crest. We want to get to the right here so that we can get a better line going into Druids. So right side here, cut to the left, you can cut the curb. Braking point is somewhere. I don't really have a marker for this one, it's just like, this feels about right. No max braking. Our goal is to get the car to turn and to modulate the speed. We should get on max throttle about between the apexes of the corner. I think I was a little bit greedy here and I didn't even catch the second apex, but that's okay. It doesn't actually hurt you that much. So, bleed off the brakes, balance the car a little bit on the pedals. We're gonna miss the apex a little bit, that's fine. At this point, we need to understand that there is a crest. So there's a crest here. If we go over that crest with a significant amount of steering input and throttle, again, it's gonna make the car very squirrely. So we need to get the steering as straight as possible before when we go over the crest. So we need to complete most of the turn before we get to that point. If you're still turning heavily when you go over the crest, then probably your line is wrong. You're not getting tight enough on this apex or something. So straighten, and in this car we can use all of this. That's fine. We'll mainly use it so that we can get the steering to be straight when we go over the crest. It's not so much that you can go faster through the corner by running wide on the exit. Not really. It's more that going fast requires that the car is completely straight going over the crest, because even if you hold the slide, you will still lose speed because the car is sideways. So that's about perfect. That's how you want to do it. The last corner, the braking marker is before this point, somewhat before, depends. This corner depends massively on your tire condition and your fuel load. When the car is very light and with very good tires, you can brake roughly here, like on top of the crest near the marker board, which you shouldn't be using. But anyway, when the car is heavy or the tires are bad, you will probably have to brake where the car is currently, like significantly earlier. Because missing the apex in this corner is just terrible. You lose half a second if you miss the apex. Ask me how I know. Well, because I did it like 10 laps in a row. So, hard on the brakes, down the third. You can use second if you feel like, but second will usually make the exit a little bit more sketchy. We want to hold the brakes all the way to a late apex, so the apex should be about here, where the access road is. That's a good place. And you want, ideally, you would want your front tire to roll over the inside curbing at the apex, but not the rear, because if the rear goes over it, it tends to unsettle the car more. The front going over it does fine. Roll onto the power, because as you can see, I got greedy. I put all the power down, because sideways, mainly because I still had too much steering input because I was missing the apex. If I got the apex correctly, and I didn't get too greedy on power, none of this slide would have happened. But the slide is not a massive problem. It's catchable. It will warn you. You can feel it in the force feedback that okay, it wants to go, and you just do a little bit of counter steer early. If you let it develop, then it's gonna go terribly. But that is again something you need to practice, is to how to feel when the car is just about to go into a slide and catch it before it even really happens. And then it's just flat out. Yeah, that's about it. Okay. So any questions at this point? It sounds like no. So I will be stopping the screen share and getting on slow zone, and if somebody wants me to take a look at their lap or something, just let me know and I'll be there in a few minutes.
Right, thanks.
Do we want to flip the server?
Yeah, I was just about to say that.
Do you want to flip it or can you just reset it?
I guess they're flipping.
Well, I mean, I can just fast forward it to next session once I join, but it will be a few minutes because I need to get into my VR setup.
Ah, just leave. Oh, or I guess it's only
Yeah, it's
practice.
only-
So
yeah,
so it doesn't matter. Okay, cool. Yeah, just drive.
So no racing today.
Show them what you got.
Pit exit's clear. We've got cold tyres, we need to get some heat into them. The brake temperatures are low, we need to get some heat into them. exit looks clear. Stay behind the line. You're clear of the incident. Green flag. Sector 1 is green. I didn't catch that. Sector 3 is now yellow. Green flag Sector 3. Yellow flag. Incident clear. Back to green flag. It's fine, mate. It's just a scrape.
Low tire pressure. Stay clear of the curbs.
There's a car behind. Stay inside the line. Blue flag.
Yellow flag in sector 2.
Okay, spotter calls, please, Claire. Sector 3 is now clear.
No, I'm just hanging around anyway.
Outside of track limits there.
Oh, in case someone didn't know, I would highly recommend using the Jodier setup that I put in the spec car setups channel. The aggressive preset is okay, but I think the Jodier setup is easier to drive. I did the same lap times on
Clear
both.
right.
Yellow flag.
The Snetterton one?
has just done a 151.65.
Low tire pressure, stay clear of the curbs.
Pit exit's clear. You're clear. Incident clear. Green flag in sector 2. The guy behind has just done a 229.04. Yellow flag, stay sharp.
Yellow flag in sector 1.
Green flag, you're clear.
Yellow flag, be careful.
Yellow flag.
Left side, clear left.
Green flag. The guy behind has just done a 154.84. P6. Watch the track limits, please, champ. Sector 2 is now green. Brake temperatures are fine.
There's a slow car up ahead.
Shankar, you want to cut way more.
Or okay, cool.
Turning into right on the second chicane.
Your tire
You
temps
just
are all good.
barely touched the curbing. You want to go really hard over it.
Slow car ahead.
P9. Sector 1 is 0.
Right side, clear right.
Slow car ahead. Yellow flag in sector 1.
flag won't count. You've cut
I
the
think you
track.
need to turn a little bit earlier on the right-hand part.
Yellow flag. Green flag, incident clear. You're 2/10 off the pace in sector 1. Alright champ, we need to watch these track limits. Track limits, this lap will be deleted.
Shankar, I would say your biggest time loss is in the hairpin at the moment. You're braking way earlier and more than I need to.
Car right.
Yeah.
Hold your line. Clear
You can
right.
kind of almost double apex it in a way.
Sector 1 is 0.28 off the base. Okay, champ, you've got half your fuel left. Sector 2 is 0.7 off the face.
Yellow flag in Sector 1.
Yellow flag in Sector 1. We can see Malone has gone off. Green flag Sector 1. Watch your speed. The guy ahead's last lap time is a 150.05.
Low tire pressure, stay away from curbs.
You're all clear, stay behind the line. You've got cold brakes all round, be careful, your tyres are cold, watch out.
Yeah, so far I find TC2.
No, I didn't catch that.
Yeah, it just is. It's significantly slower on most tracks in the dry.
No, yeah, I noticed it cutting in.
And yeah, I think if you are uncomfortable on TC1, it isn't really a throttle problem, it's a steering problem.
Yeah.
Because the car just doesn't have that much power. I mean, on second gear it could be throttle, but in any other gear, it's just that the steering isn't minimized and smooth enough.
Slow car ahead.
Your brake temps are good. Sector 1 is quick.
Yellow flag in sector 3.
Your right tyres are cold. Sector 2 is 1.6, off the pace.
If you lose the car there.
Yellow flag.
I have a couple of comments for you, Shankar. First of all, use the brakes more. You can brake
Okay,
longer
Jeff. You
in
got
the
some minor aero
corners.
damage. Stay out.
You
It's
tend to
not
be
that
on
bad.
throttle quite a lot before the apex. It's preferable
flag,
to
you're
slightly
clear of the
drag the
incident.
brakes, just slightly, like less than 10%, to keep the weight on the front, keep the nose down. The
Watch
car
your
turns
speed.
a lot better. That way you can get the corners better. You also tend to try to take a really late apex in a lot of corners. Doesn't really work in this car that well. Like I said, more of a rounded corner shape than the GT3 high power kind of style where you want to just maximize the acceleration, because this one doesn't really accelerate that much.
No, that's great. Yeah, appreciate it.
At least in turn 1, I think you're kind of late apexing, but you're also turning in a little bit sharply, maybe a little bit earlier, but more progressive turn in, while you are still like dragging the brakes longer into the corner. It's really difficult to explain how it should feel, because this car is very much kind of like a feel-based thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, I'm gonna go see some other people how they are doing. Let's see.
Low tire pressure. Stay clear of the curbs.
Looks like you're clear on the pit exit. Your brakes are cold. We need to get some heat into them. We've got cold tyres. We need to get some heat into them.
Should make dinner soon.
Yellow flag ahead. Be careful.
standard.
Oh yeah, I haven't even chosen what car to drive.
I don't even know if I'm gonna race.
Sector 1 is yellow.
Well, there's the room.
Sector 1 is green.
The Merc feels really good, except for its understeer.
Yellow flag. Incident clear. Green flag.
Arjun, you want to brake deeper into the hairpin. Also, in general, you are overdriving a little bit.
B5.
It's a good line through turn 1. A little bit too much steering on the exit, but and if anybody else wants me to take a look at their driving and give feedback, please speak up. People are so quiet here.
Let's focus in.
Mind these track limits, please, champ.
Your mic is really low on mine. I'm not sure. Just me.
Yeah, barely heard whoever that was.
Yeah, I would up the gain on it. The input gain more.
You're a 10th off in sector 1.
Yellow flag in sector 3.
Sector 3 is clear. Green flag. Sector 2 is 1.3 seconds off the pace.
I'm curious if Arjun has any tires left after a couple of laps. The amount of screeching is quite excessive. Clearly you can go pretty fast with that because the Delta has been for like 49 something a couple of times, but
That lap was at 150, 3.75.
so I believe the brake pad compound is the same, so the answer would be yes.
And I saw that the Snetterton Jardier setup uses brake pad 2 and 3.
Yes.
Brake pad 2.
Yes. Pads 1 don't last very long because the pad is physically smaller. It's the same material, but it's so small and the car is so heavy that
Sector 1 time is good.
they wear out really quick. Also, it doesn't matter because there's not enough tire. Like, you are hard on ABS at like 80% brake pressure anyway, so.
Alright, that should help a little bit when it does reset my volume settings.
Yep.
Yeah,
Now we can hear you.
Anyways, I was saying I'm here to help Tim. If there's one more person, that's fine.
I'll probably be back out there 2.7 seconds off pace.
Well, I mean, that means it's easy to find 2 seconds.
Yeah, usually.
Yep. You were still holding steering on the exit.
Yellow flag in sector 2.
Thank you.
What's the time anyway?
It's 6:15.
Yeah,
Oh.
for you it's around 3:15.
Your brake temperatures look good.
Still have some time to decide if I want to do the Alpine or not.
Oh, I recommend the Merc. Merc feels really, ironically good. Like, it feels really nice to drive.
Looked really boring. Like really boring. Probably even more so than the M4.
Sector 1 time's okay.
The Alpine should be fine.
But I've driven the Camaro too much. Like,
Yeah,
it's my main GT4 car, so
Fair.
I'm just a little bit bored of it.
I think the Alpine is like the exact opposite of the Camaro.
Yes, the Alpine, well, it's deadly, but it's also very fun and very fast.
Another option is the Jetta.
The Beamer is just not very friendly with Dunnington. I mean, it's decent, but...
Well, I mean this one that we're working with right now.
Oh yeah, well, I don't know.
Well,
Maserati is straight up not fun.
double on your own.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to just, like, curb stomp, because I didn't see any names that I know are of similar pace in the M2 field. I did have a really good M2 race earlier today with
Sector
Dan
2 is
Land,
1.6 seconds off the
a
pace.
couple of other guys from the Aris community.
Right on. Well, thanks for having me.
But yeah, I mean, almost all the problems in the M2 are related to steering inputs. To some extent pedals as well, but all the oversteer is pretty much in the steering.
This is the exact opposite driving style between the M2 and race room. Like, that car you have to wrestle it around the track.
I mean, when you really drive this one to the limit, you don't really, in some ways you don't really wrestle it, but the minor steering corrections are quite hectic.
You're a tenth off the pace in Sector 1.
Like, I've never worked quite so hard as I was working in the race earlier today, just to go through turn 1 in Brands at the highest possible corner speed. It's a lot of work, especially since it's over a crest and the car is really kind of really on the edge of doing things you don't want it to do all the time there. But that's what makes it so fun. And it's also, I will say, the M2 is in some ways, I mean, it's in some ways it's easy because it's slower, you have more time to think and everything, but in some ways it's also very difficult because
To watch the track limits.
the difference is when you get to like even decent lap times are very small. It's a very small error that costs you like 4/10 because there is no acceleration. You can't like plateau the error out. Early on the turn in there, or at least the apex was early. I will also say that in the M2 it's probably somewhat useful to listen to the brake noises because they are telling you
Okay, Jam, we need to
a
watch
little
these
bit
track
about the
limits.
car behavior, like especially the ABS noise is very useful to listen to. And it is normal that ABS is triggering when you are dragging the brakes into a corner entry, but the amount how much they are triggering will tell you a little bit about just how much you are asking from the car. I will also say that it might be useful to do a little bit of driving in this M2 with the TC off, because it's not terribly difficult to do, but it will force you to be very careful about what you do. Although this track might be difficult because the last corner especially is, yep. Yeah, the last corner, because you go over the crest, it's
Yellow flag, stay sharp.
difficult. So I would maybe not try it here, but on some track that doesn't have these problems. Part of the reason why I chose this track is especially because this track has these crests, because they demonstrate very well the kind of chassis behavior of the car, where it can get really sideways even when you are not really doing anything if there's some kind of external force to upset the car.
The guy behind has just done a 150.65. Green flag in sector 3. Yellow flag. You're outside of track limits there. The incident's clear. Green flag. Okay, Jam, you need to watch the track limits.
some. I think having too much fun hot lapping with this car.
Ron, if you're here, you probably should brake a little earlier for turn 1.
Alright. What's your speed limit in the pits?
Hey Arjun, you watch any of the videos from Gosling? He did a thing on them steering wheels that you printed out.
Who?
I forget his first name. His last name's Gosling. He does a lot of sim racing stuff. He's out of Australia. Maybe it's Europe. But he did, like, there's a company that's selling those 3D printed wheels like you did, and then they got like a couple different accessories also, magnetic shifters that you can attach to it and stuff like that.
I know Isla Designs do that, but the shipping cost is ridiculously high when you want to ship them to US. Like their wheel designs they made like an Audi R8 steering wheel. And it's pretty cool, but it's like $100 and another $50 to ship it, so yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. He was saying like they were like 40 pounds and 60 pounds, I think he said. And so I don't know what it would be to ship it, but it sounded like they were pretty cheap.
Yeah. I guess my main material cost is probably, well, if you take a look at a filament's like $20, but you're gonna use like $5 worth of filament. Then the grip were like $6, and then vinyl wrap was like $16, and it's not really much in a DIY yet.
Right on. They did have some pretty nice grips, but yours look pretty good too.
Yeah. Mine is tennis racket grip.